No, in which case I'll move on. The first substantive item is the meeting summary, or the minutes from the August meeting, which I guess is fading in memory, but it was somewhat of a momentous meeting because that was where we approved the standards. I know, Kirsten, you have a correction, which I'll ask you just to mention in a minute, but also if anyone else has anything, please chime in. So, Kirsten, did you want to mention, I think you picked up a typo?
Yes, it was a tiny typo on the page. Sorry, I have control when I read, but not afterwards. So I can't find it now, but it was just a too much. So, and Pamela has made a note on it.
Okay, yeah. It was line 205. Okay, so we've noted that, and that'll be changed. Thank you. Does anyone else have anything else they'd like to comment on the summary? Okay, then, failing any further comments, we'll take those as approved, as a good record of what was transpired at that meeting. Now, we're coming to the crunch time, because now we should be turning to Amsterdam. Are you online yet, Amsterdam? Okay, I'm going to jump to item 3, which is the discussion of the GSSB self-evaluation. And that's something on which I will be leading. So just shuffling my papers here, excuse me.
Hello, can you hear us now, Michael?
Oh, Bastian, I can, just in time.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, see, yeah. Always works out in the end.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'll put myself on mute and we'll go back to item the discussion of the future work plan, and over to you, Bastian.
Thank you, Michael. So, yes, indeed, we will look at the discussion on the future work program, and we have prepared a number of slides that you should be seeing on the screen now, if the technology allows. We have item 02 and 03 for you today. The first one sets out the feedback received on the draft GSSB work program, and the second one presents a slightly revised version of the work program that we have discussed, if I'm not mistaken, for the last time in the June meeting or July meeting, and approved for public consultation back then. With that work program, we also have a proposed schedule for 2017. And this is where we want to lay an emphasis in the discussion today. The objective for the next minutes is to discuss and finalize the 2017 schedule for the standards, as well as to discuss and finalize the high-level GSSB work program. And what we will do with the work program, as well as with the priorities for 2017, we are aiming to publish that on the website by the end of the calendar year. So depending on where the discussion goes today, we can either present a revised draft for approval in the November call, or ideally we actually approve it today with amendments as discussed in the next minutes. But that is where we'll see where we're ending up in the discussion. So let me take a couple of minutes to give a high-level overview of the feedback received. I think that is one element, but also just quickly summarize what we based our decision on in terms of amendments to the work program, as well as the priorities for 2017. I'm looking now at item 02, the input for discussion on GSB work program. And so this is a combination of inputs here, feedback. In part, it is the outcomes of the public comment that was open from 30th of June to 28th of September. It also holds the input from the Stakeholder Council on the draft GSSB program. as well as the out-of-scope comments that we received during the public comment on the transition to standards between the 19th of April and the 17th of July. And the out-of-scope comments made by you, the GSSB members, during the various review rounds of the draft GRI standards. As you remember, you had indicated quite a number of issues throughout the review, where you said, well, this is based on the scope that you've given the project, not something that we want to address as part of the transition, but it should form an input into the priority discussion for the review and potential update of standards in the time after we have released the standards. And this is where we are now, so we're picking this up again. Let me spend a couple of minutes then on summarizing the feedback received in a bit more detail, and then explaining in the next step the priorities that we have proposed based on an analysis of all the different feedbacks that we looked at. First of all, the stakeholder feedback received. We have 15 individuals and groups that have, institutions that have responded to the public comment. You see that in Annex 1, where we have represented the full set of comments. And broadly, you can categorize these in a couple of dimensions. So the standards, the standards prioritized for revision is a first category or a set of feedback received, and there were a couple of suggestions in relation to what was set out in the draft work program, but also additional items. And what was mentioned in the feedback was human rights, quite prominently, energy and climate, emissions related updates, and that was also in reference to recent developments in the field, biodiversity, effluents and waste, employment, diversity and equal opportunity. And that ranges from several mentionings to individual institutions mentioning it. Yeah. So we have as a second category also for you here the standards proposed for development by stakeholders, and that is in particular there was agreement with tax as being one of the issues that could be prioritized. Again, disability was mentioned, and we have seen that repeatedly over the last years, as well as land and property rights. Another set of feedback was along the lines of the high impact sectors to prioritize. Remember, that was a specific question we had also asked. And how I would summarize that, it is mostly in the high impact sector, and as well as then a couple of specific sectors that have been mentioned here. So it's mining, metals, chemical industry, construction, energy, and a couple of others. And I think this gives us a good indication overall for what we want to do once we get to the point that we can